Good afternoon, in fact, good evening. I'm aware that it's overrun a little, and I'm probably the one thing standing between you and a nice cool beer, so I'll keep it focused so we don't groan over too much further. So, like we were just saying, I'm Keith Harper from Sycurio, and what we want to cover off in this last 20 minutes is all around how we attack or address compliant payments or secure payments from within a digital channel or an AI application. Typically, this is things like chatbots, virtual agents, voice bots, IVR, that sort of thing. It's been driven largely of what we've seen in the contact center environment. So when we're talking about AI, we tend to talk, that's what we're talking about. It's the chatbot type applications in a contact center. The popularity of which has been growing quite a lot over more recent years. It's not overtaken the voice channel. That's still the traditional way that consumers are contacting organizations and so on, but the digital channel is really on its way now. It's maturing. And there are a lot of different kinds of application which we term as AI. And not only that, we're also having to support different payment methods as well, which is coming along with this. So if someone is not using the voice channel to contact someone and potentially make a payment, if they've contacted an organization over web chat or chat bot, often the consumer or the customer has to switch channel to be able to make a payment. They've got to go and dial a number to go through to a contact center and talk to an agent to make a payment. So what we've enabled is basically to pay enable that channel. Don't allow the customer to have to switch and go elsewhere. Allow them to complete a payment in that channel that they contacted the organization in the first place. The problem, which I'm going to present in a minute, and what we see all the time, is around how do you secure that? Sycurio historically have provided a PCI compliant, secure way to allow payments over the phone in real time. That's what we've been doing for 10, 12 years. In the last 3 or 4 years or so, we've started to be able to pay enable the digital channel as well. And also, at the same time, support different payment methods as well. So now we can support digital wallets because a lot of this digital channel, the consumers are now making a payment using a mobile device. As soon as you allow someone to make a payment that way, you can support things like Google Pay and Apple Pay because it's now on a mobile device. They're not on the voice channel anymore. There's a bit of a list here at the back, as you can see, of the kind of applications we're talking about. And I'll present the issue in a minute and an answer or a solution as to how we address being able to assess what that chatbot is doing with payment data. Is it handling payment data? Is it processing it? Is it storing it, worst case? What's happening with it? How can a QSA come and assess a chatbot application when they can't see into it? So, for example, like we were saying before, this is things like chatbots and voice bots and all those sort of things. It tends to be things which don't include an agent because that's what they're there to do. So AI applications are brilliant at automating stuff and taking workload away from agents. That's what they're designed to do, and they do it brilliantly. The trade-off, if you like, is, does an organization who's got a contact center and they're enabling digital channels for their customers, do they go for an application which uses an open data source, which gives them loads of flexibility and freedom because they can kind of understand how that application is working? Or do they go for an application which is far more closed and, as a result, far more secure, and privacy is far more of a concern, if you like, but seems to make sense? Because if it's more secure and that sort of thing, well, probably it's going to handle payment card data in a more secure, compliant way. If you look at those bottom 2 bullet points on the screen, the argument which probably wins is the first of the two, because that's what's going to give you efficiency and convenience and freedom over that application. But that's at the risk, potentially, of security. So, like we were saying, these applications, these chatbot or AI bots, are brilliant at things like doing ID&V to check what someone's calling about, doing all the intent and the sentiment analysis and all that brilliant stuff. They've never really been designed to handle payments. That's not what AI bots are typically there to do. Okay, they're there to pick up the more maybe repetitive, monotonous type tasks away from humans, because chatbots cost a lot less than a real live contact center agent in a contact center. They can work 24/7, flat out. They don't have to go on a holiday. So that's why they're there. That's why they're gaining popularity, and they're very good at what they do. If you want to then enable that bot to do the identifying who's calling, finding out what they want to go about, and they might be able to signpost them to different parts of the organization, it would be great if that chatbot could also say, I can see your outstanding balance is 250 quid. Do you want to pay that now? Now, I'm sure they could, because chatbots are great, and they could probably request payment card data from someone who's chatting to them on that text-based interaction with a chatbot. But all of a sudden, that chatbot or that AI bot is now going to get exposed to payment card data. Straight away, it's in scope for PCI compliance. So how do you measure that, monitor that, and assess it? So this is where the solution from Sycurio comes in, if you like. This is a way of doing it, if you like. So the question is, how do you assess, understand what that chatbot's doing? And it could potentially be a third-party supplier of AI bots that a contact center organization has integrated into their system and is working great. But the contact center operator, the merchant, if you like, the end customer, can't see inside that bot. It's like a black box, it's often termed out. So they don't know what it's doing with card data. So how do you provide evidence then to a QSA or an assessor or an auditor as to what's happening with people's payment card data when they do actually do a transaction through that digital channel? So the contact center environment has done the first thing right. They've pay-enabled the digital channel. Brilliant. So they're not only taking payments through the voice channel. Now they're addressing the customer's requirement to do a payment over the channel of choice. So what's the answer to all of this, if you like? How do you allow payments through digital channels and be PCI compliant and fully PCI compliant, to SAQA type compliance, where the merchant is effectively outsourcing the burden of all that PCI controls to a solution provider like the likes of Sycurio? So what we do is we separate, if you like, the payment part of that customer journey from the chatbot part of the customer journey, but we're not going to let the consumer or the customer leave the chatbot journey, if you like. So we are going to pay enable it. We're doing it in a PCI compliant way, and we do it in a very simple way as well. And I'll give you a good example of this in a moment with a couple of screenshots of how it can look in real life. What we're also doing is if you separate it so that the payment is done by a PCI compliant method, that means the QSAs or the assessors and so on can actually look at that. And they can look at that very clearly because they're going to have an AOC as an output from that, the merchant is, because that's being provided by a level 1 PCI DSS service provider. So all of a sudden, it can be assessed and it can be checked properly. And you can get your AOC and your ROC and all that sort of thing as a merchant to say, here we go, and I can show you how we are not getting exposed to card data because we've got a solution now that's taking care of it, and it's easily definable, if you like. So the how is, this is the way we do it, anyway, this is how we're doing it for a lot of merchants now. And this can often work alongside the voice channel, so it's not replacing calls to make payments. It can work as well as. We provide an API, a secure API in various different methods. I won't go into the weeds of it, but we've got an XML version, we've got a JSON version, we've got a version that will work with an AI bot, a chat bot, a virtual agent. And when that chatbot gets to the point where a payment needs to be facilitated in real time, it will use the API we expose to it to generate a payment link. Okay, this is how it was originally designed. We've now got a UI that sits on top of it to allow agents to do this as well. But this is to enable an AI application to do it. The AI application will request a payment link. It happens instantly, and they'll say, I want a payment link to enable the payment of £250, euros, whatever it might be. We immediately return that payment link, which is a HTTPS secure URL, that's what all the payment link is, back to the bot. What the bot can do is they can either paste that across the text-based conversation they're having with someone, or even better, launch that URL. So it pops open a payment page for the customer to enter their card details. Now, what's happening is, and I'll show you how this pans out now. let's take, for example, it's a little bit small. Hopefully you can see. Oh, Christ, it's big behind me. Right, OK. So what we've got on screen is a fictitious energy company. And there is a chatbot session going on in that bottom right-hand corner. So what the chatbot's done so far, it's done an ID&V. It's identified who's calling. It's asked for their phone number in this case. They've typed it in. So it's done a data dip and said, it's Mr. Anderson. How are you doing? How can I help you today? What Mr. Anderson's done, he's then gone and said, you can see this progressing down the chat conversation here. He said, I want to know what my outstanding balance is. Chatbot, intelligent, can work that out as well, and it says you owe 200 and something pounds, whatever it is up there. So the chatbot's doing all its clever stuff. It's dipping into a database here, it's doing a lookup there, it's doing its verifications and stuff. Now it's got to the point, and it's offered that person the option to make a payment now. So this is where we pay-enabled the chatbot application in this case. So this is the AI bot in this case. Now, to do this in a compliant way, if the customer chooses one of those options, there's quite a lot of options in this one, but let's say they choose the one which is browser, I think it is. What that will do is it will, in the background, use our API to request a payment link. We'll immediately send it back, configured to allow a payment of that 200 and something quid. And the chatbot will also launch it, and it looks something like that. Now, that page is going to allow the customer to enter their card details and make a payment. Okay. If that was opened on a mobile device, we could have offered some alternative payment methods like digital wallets as well. This is going to, in the traditional way, allow them to enter credit card details. It could have offered an Apple Pay or a Google Pay or a PayPal, if you like. We can also do manage open banking and instant bank transfers. It doesn't matter. We'll allow the checkout experience depending on what device they've just opened. They're just accessing this link. But in this case, it's launched it just in a browser. Now, that page is served from Sycurio's secure web servers direct to the end customer. That is not touching the website, Acme Energy, and it's not touching the AI bot. So now the experience is between Sycurio, so PCI DSS level 1 service provider, Sycurio, who is able to handle that card data, and the end customer. So they're going to go ahead and enter their card details and click submit. The other thing Sycurio are here to do is do a real-time transaction as well. So we're actually going to do the transaction as well. And that might be against whoever the payment gateway is that the merchant's using already. We wouldn't expect them to change it. So that might have been a transaction against WorldPay or Adyen or Global Payments or something like that. And we can immediately return a result back for the consumer to say, that's great, your payment of 240-something pounds happened successfully. Here's an auth code, transaction reference, whatever it might be. The API in the background has been letting the chatbot know what's going on. So when the consumer started to put in their details, if I just go back one, if I can do, there we go. So when they started to put their card details in, when they put their PAN in, the API would have let the chatbot know they're now entering some details. And eventually, the API will let the chatbot know they've now performed a transaction and it was successful, and here's all the transaction data. So we're letting the chatbot know what's happening without exposing any sensitive data to the chatbot. So going back a little bit, this is where I said what we can do to make sure it's all done in a PCI-compliant way is separate the payment element, or the payment part of the journey, from the chatbot part of the journey. Because what the chatbot can do now is that on the left-hand side, the consumer can now close that web page. That's done. They can now continue to chat to the chatbot, and it can say, I've seen your payment was successful. Is there anything else I can help you with? And they can carry on. So the real important thing here is that the consumer never had to leave the chat session, okay, to make the payment. They weren't having to divert over to a contact center to speak to someone to make a payment, okay, because that's where we often see, or where merchants are often seeing a fallout in the payment completion, if you like. Because if they have to send them elsewhere or divert them elsewhere, either the end customer can't be bothered, or doesn't, or forgets, or for whatever reason, that payment doesn't complete. So the big benefit, if you like, of pay-enabling digital channels means that you're not having to deal with channel shift and move people elsewhere. Now, the concept of that we've seen applies not just to chatbots and so on. It applies to any, in this case, any digital channel. So you could be applying the same sort of process to, like I was saying before, it is just an API that's powering that capability. And you could use this alongside the voice channel quite easily. And if you've got contact center agents who are doing secure payments over the phone, our traditional stuff that we've been doing for ages, should the caller decide, well, that our voice channel is where you invite the caller to key in their card details using the keys on their phone, so they don't have to speak it out loud. They might go, no, I can't, don't want to, or whatever. The contact center agent could say, well, that's fine. Do you want me to send you a link, a payment link configured for that amount? And you can click on that and do it in your own time. Or should I email it to you and we can do it together while we're on the phone? It's just giving the consumer or the customer another option rather than go away or go down a different channel, which they may not do. Now, like I was saying, it is an API at the end of the day. That's what generates the payment link in real time, whether it's an application asking for one or if it's a human asking for one. So the contact center agent can use just a user interface. Sits on top of the API and basically allows a contact center agent or a user to do exactly the same as an AI application. Okay, so you can use them together. It's still using the same solution. So the user interface will just allow a human to enter in an amount, password protect it if needs be. These payment links can all be password protected and so on. Click submit, and it just uses the API to generate a payment link, but we send it back to the UI instead of back to an AI application. And then the contact center agent can then copy and paste that across a web chat they might be having with someone, or email it to someone, or text it to someone. And like I was saying before, if they do text it to someone and they open that link on a mobile phone, then all of a sudden you can also give them other options and not have to get the payment card out. In fact, if they've got a Google Pay or an Apple Pay, they'll use that to authorize the payment. If they've got a banking app on their phone, they could choose an open banking method, which is the most secure way of doing it from what we've seen at the moment in terms of methods. That's an instant bank-to-bank transfer. Okay, which is, that just pops up the user's bank app on their mobile phone. They choose the banking app that they use, whether it's a Barclays or a TSB or whatever it might be, and they do it that way. So it's not confined this just to AI bots. We've concentrated on AI bots because of their prevalence and their growth at the moment. But the use cases are huge when you realize, well, what all we're actually doing is generating a payment link and getting that link to a consumer somehow. Then all of a sudden, you don't have to have an agent doing it. You don't have to have a human doing it. An application can do that dead easy with an API. Because the chatbots are probably using APIs all over the place already. This is just another one. So the key thing really to take away from it is when we're pay-enabling a digital channel, we must do it in a PCI compliant way because now you're going to allow payments over that channel as well as all the other clever stuff that the bot's doing. Make sure that the payment element temporarily, although you're not losing the consumer, temporarily is handled by a level 1 service provider of PCI compliance, because then you're separating it, and it can be assessed, and it can be checked, and you can get an AOC on the back of it. You can do all of that, and all of a sudden, the merchants, very much like they are with the traditional way of protecting voice calls and so on, are no longer on the hook for the 400 and something controls that they are otherwise. It comes right down to, in our case, 6. Okay, that's all they're on the hook for then. And one of those, for example, is make sure that your application or your agents use this method when they need to take a secure payment. That's one of the 6 done already. Tick. And the other 5 are that easy to take care of as well. So it's very simple for the end merchant to outsource the burden of their PCI compliance to a company like Sycurio. Okay, because we'll hold all the actual card data when it's getting entered, either through the digital channel or the voice channel. We are doing the real-time transaction against the payment gateway, and we never expose it, the payment card data, to the application. We never expose it to the contact center environment at all. And that API as well, when a transaction has occurred, we can post securely the transaction data from the payment gateway. So whatever we get back from the WorldPays of the world, when a transaction's happened, we can post all of that to the merchant, to whatever target they want that to go to. So whilst we always will use the payment gateway that they're already using, we never expect them to change that. We can also post that transaction data to an endpoint they provide, but they will always see the transactions appear on their payment gateways portal, because we'll use their existing merchant IDs and use their existing gateways. You don't have to change any of that. So it's we don't expect that merchant to have to do very much at all when they introduce the PCI compliance into their digital channels. Just to finish on, because we're at time and I know we're over, if you are hanging around, we are exhibiting in the hall, and there is a chance to win a £500 headset from Sonos, if you can remember the game Simon. Okay, so bob along. If you've got 5 minutes, be in with a chance of winning it, because it's a brilliant headset. If you're good at Simon, you'll be in with a chance of winning. So on that, I will finally let people get to the bar. But thank you very much for your time today.